Welcome back to Halloween in July, everyone. We're on a quest to avoid the horrors of the surface world by immersing ourselves in the horrors of video games. We've also got a cool special going on right now where every new patron pledge of at least $5 over at patreon.com/charlattanwonder gets a special greeting card delivered to their domicile to commemorate our summer of constant terror. And to help you hit that $5 mark, I've slashed the yearly discounts as low as they'll go. Click the link in the description if you dare. So today we're going to talk about Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl, which for those of you that don't know is a first-person shooter with RPG elements taking place in the radiation-infested wasteland of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Stalker is made by one GSC Game World who developed the game on the X-Ray engine. Stalker was initially planned to be released in 2003, but over the course of development, everything that could go sideways did. They even at one point had the entire alpha of their game leaked, which ended up being very different from what we finally got, but that's a story and a mod for another time. After many setbacks, Stalker was finally released in 2007 to a lot of positive press. So the premise of Stalker is that after the nuclear disaster of the Chernobyl power plant went down in the 80s, another accident of some sort happened in 2006, which no one can really explain how or why it happened. Thanks to this second incident, a strange sort of metaphysical interference started happening all around the Chernobyl exclusion zone that defied any sort of logical explanation. On top of these anomalies, as they began to be called, there were horrible mutants that started coming out of the zone, and people started discovering artifacts, these strange objects that could give a person spectacular abilities and were highly coveted the world over. So since I know someone will bring it up, let's take a sec to address Stalker's source material. Roadside Picnic. The only thing that Stalker really shares with the novel is the idea of the zone, which in the book there are a bunch of zones, the ideas of anomalies and artifacts, and the namesake stalkers who navigate the zone for one reason or another. Stalker is a really loose interpretation of Roadside Picnic, and I'd suggest you approach both of them as they were essentially separate entities for the sake of your enjoyment of the both of them. The game takes place in the not so far future of 2012, where you, a nameless person who bears the mark of the Stalker, wakes up in the zone with no memory and a mysterious message on your PDA, that's an iPhone before iPhones if you weren't around for that, telling you that you need to kill Strelock, and the rest is up to you. So first and foremost, Stalker is a shooter game that has RPG elements. You're not going to be picking a class or anything like that, but you are in an open world where you do well to visit safe towns every now and again, to barter your loot with the vendors, see if anyone's got a job for you, and equip yourself carefully as you can only carry so much and bullets count towards your carry limit. So you don't really level up or gain any sort of special skills in Stalker. You do, however, become more powerful by finding better gear. You'll start with essentially nothing and probably find a Makarov in its native habitat of being discarded on the ground, and that plus an old farm shotgun picked off the remains of a low-level bandit are probably going to be what gets you through the first few hours of the game. There's much better stuff out there in the zone, but you're gonna have to work for it. Expect to play the first 5 or 6 hours of the game extremely cautiously, as you likely won't be able to hit crap from more than 10 meters out, and getting winged once or twice is going to bring you very near death as you've got the most basic starter armor there is. Armor and suits are the main way you improve your survivability in Stalker. You'll start with some really basic stuff with virtually no ballistic or radiation protection, but if you save your money and keep your eyes open, you'll eventually be able to find a proper Stalker suit or save up for an SP99 suit from the ecologist. There's also crazy endgame stuff like the SP99M suit, the literal exosuit that increases your carry weight and turns you into a walking tank, or my personal favorite, the all-rounder that is the Siva suit. You can actually find one of those laying around in perfect condition somewhere in the wild area, by the way. Once you get the gear that you want, that isn't quite the end of it. Weapons and armor have durability condition on them, and once it starts getting low, even endgame stuff becomes near useless. Take a few too many careless hits from bandits or dump the mag a few too many times? Well, congratulations. Your ballistic protection is gone now, and your weapon won't stop jamming no matter how much you clean it. You'd better make sure you have enough cash on hand to replace your stuff when the time comes, as repairmen won't show up to the zone until Call of Pripyat. One of the ways you're going to be getting money and gear is through good old-fashioned questing. This ranges from stuff that's major story quests or just asking around the bar if anyone needs a job done. The latter is going to be a lot of basic, almost procedural stuff along the lines of, go find me this artifact, or go kill this nameless NPC that hangs around over here. But there's a few more interesting ones thrown into the mix for good measure. There's also reputation, which while is a little hard to follow, is easy enough to get a lot of after a while. There's a zone-wide Stalker ranking based on how often you've been able to get quests done and turned in on time, how many bandits and or monsters you put into the dirt, and so on. I got to number 1 of these ranks about 2/3 of the way through the game, and you do start at rock bottom, so it's not too hard. I have no idea if it even did anything for me. Then there's your reputation among various factions such as Duty, Freedom, and the Ecologist. This reputation system is as simple as doing quests for these guys makes them like you, and shooting at them makes them not. You can eventually get one of these factions to be considered friendly on site or shoot on site, and there's even a way to keep all of them operational till the end game if you want to get a good boy ending. Then there's the zone, which will be doing your stalker-ing. The zone is everything within the cordon around Chernobyl, and the radiation is often the least of your problems. The zone is big. The zone is full of dudes who are going to shoot first and ask questions never. The zone is full of anomalies that are going to kill you. Anomalies are essentially errors in the code of reality that do all sorts of nasty things, such as creating gravity vortexes, spontaneous fire, electricity blast, and the forbidden ecto-cooler. These could very easily kill you, especially when you're at lower parts of the game and you don't have very good gear. And most of them are invisible to the naked eye until it's too late. So how do you get around them? Well, lucky for you, that PDA you've got has a little sensor for anomalous activity that tends to go off, and there's a bit of visual distortion around the general area of an anomaly. To figure out exactly where they are, you whip out your infinite supply of screws and chuck them in the general direction of where you think the anomaly is, trying to get it to go off. Some anomalies are triggered by contact, some are on a sort of intermittent timer, so good luck with that. So why would anyone want to be in this zone in the first place? Well, artifacts. That's why. Artifacts are the byproducts of the zone and the anomalies, which have all sorts of crazy properties that people from outside the zone are willing to pay top dollar for. Unfortunately for you, you're at the bottom of this food chain. The artifacts that fetch the highest price from traders will get you around 5,000 rubles. Now, 5,000 rubles in 2012, it's about 175 freedom bucks in 2012, with a roughly 29-to-1 conversion rate. Nowadays, it's more like 65-to-1 last time I checked, so I'm not even sure the modern day Stalker would make minimum wage, let alone the hazard pay for the kind of work they do. The better use of artifacts, unless you're desperate for some cash or have too many of them to equip on your person, is to take advantage of their properties. Most artifacts are very much double-edged swords, with them greatly enhancing one attribute but crippling another. There'll usually be some radiation damage or bleeding thrown into the mix too. However, if you find the right artifacts, you can balance everything out and come out ahead. By the time I was midway through this playthrough for the video, I ended up being entirely immune to radiation, my wounds closed up almost instantly, and I can sprint indefinitely across the entire zone with no setbacks in any one particular stat. That last buff is going to be very useful, by the way, as there's no fast travel in Stalker and you can only carry so much at a given time. You can carry up to 50 kilos of stuff while still being able to move normally and have a hard limit of 60 kilos without any sort of physical enhancement. That seems like a lot, and it is, because that's like 2 fully loaded suitcases for an international flight strapped to your body, but your stuff is going to add up. You're going to have to get very choosy with what kind of gear you want to bring, and the weight of bullets and healing items can really add up if you're trying to stay well stocked enough for longer forays into the zone. So even without the radiation, anomalies, and roving gangs of heavily armed bandits, the zone is a pretty spooky place. There's a lot of abandoned towns, a dreary atmosphere, and unsettling music plays as you traverse the zone. Nobody's spurs are going jingle jangle jingle out here, and the friendly faces are few and far between. There isn't very much color in the zone, and most of the local landmarks are either sites where horrible things happened, or are still possibly happening, or literal mountains of garbage. Unsurprisingly, most of the people you meet that won't shoot you for your artifacts are not in the cheeriest of moods. Then there's the real spooky stuff, like the abandoned underground areas and the mutants that come out of them. Even without the mutants, the labs would be pretty scary places. Most of them are dark, foreboding, and filled with anomalies and equipment that I'm pretty sure is not for your typical medical examination. Then we get to the mutants. Most of these can be found all over the place, but they're especially present in underground areas and in the labs. There's your typical stuff that you'll see around the zone, like pseudo-dogs and the not good boys, the pig things, and then we get into the heavy stuff. There's all these zombified stalkers that do the usual kind of shambling around, but also seem to have enough brain function left to shoot at you. Then there's the stuff that might have been human at one time, like the snorks that speak in animalistic roars and can jump like 50 feet to pounce on you. There's also the bloodsuckers, which on top of being fast, deadly, and liking to hang out in places with lots of hiding spots, can also turn invisible at will to get the jump on you. And if that wasn't enough for you, there's the horribly mutated mutated psychic controllers that'll yank you around in the air, poltergeists, and the pseudo-giants that can and will shrug off an RPG round before making short work of you. By the way, it's pitch dark in most of the areas you'll be encountering these guys. Like I can't see what's in front of me level of dark. You can find some suits that will have night vision, but they're not going to be very good until you can find the second gen stuff in the late game that doesn't make everything all green and fuzzy. So have fun wandering around that dark knowing that there's at least 3 or 4 of those bloodsuckers somewhere in the complex with you. Between the tension of firefights and the spookies in the labs, sometimes Stalker just gets real somber. Like yeah, everyone loves to joke about squatting around a barrel fire, but especially when you're in one of the safe areas, you really get a feel for how down and out people are in the zone. Some are coming to terms with how artifacts won't be the tickets to riches that they thought they were, and others are just bummed out in general about being stuck here now for trying to contain the zone or setting up a new life. Even the people that seem to be on the top of zone society, like the trader and the barkeep, don't seem to be too jazzed about their setup here. Something that stuck out to me and really nailed down this somber vibe is one time I picked up a random kill quest for a master stalker over by where the Freedom Stronghold was. I killed this guy one time out in the wilderness already, but I had to reload thanks to a bit of AI jank, because as you see, the guys from duty who I wanted to do a quest for wouldn't take cover if they needed to be in a certain place for a quest, even if that means they're in a direct line of sight for the very sniper they asked me to take out so they could safely advance on that stronghold. Turns out you can't advance a quest line if the quest giver is dead. So after like 5 or 6 reloads, I made it all the way through the raid on Freedom Stronghold, and I remembered that I still needed to deal with that master stalker before the quest timer ran out. I thought it was glitched again because at first it said the guy was right inside of the farmhouse with all the duty guys and I, but no one was shooting at me. After a second, the duty guys all wandered off from the fire in the farmhouse, leaving only the guy who was playing guitar in the camp circle. He just kept sitting there, only playing for the 2 of us. I realized at this point that this was my mark, the guy we were all hanging out with who played his guitar for us. I tried not to think about this too much aside from reassuring myself that I had a job to do and there was probably a good reason for there being a price on this guy's life. I decided to just sit there for a bit and let him finish his song though. When the music finally stopped, he looked up at me and I dumped about half a magazine's worth of rounds into his head just to make sure it was quick. In the end, he got the last laugh though, as I checked his PDA, which led me to a stash that had a whole lot of nothing useful in it, and it was situated right in the center of a bloodsucker nest. Such is the way of the zone. Unfortunately, between all the development setbacks and Stalker being a pretty old game now, it's kinda janky at times even if you're running a more stable version of the game, such as GOG's. The X-Ray engine is trying its damnedest, but the game is prone to crashing randomly every now and again. I can't get too mad though, as even with the level transitions of the zone, it's a pretty big place and all of this is very impressive for 2007. It's too bad that sometimes the immersion gets ruined by the game suddenly forgetting how to load in the next level. The NPC AI is also pretty jank for the previously mentioned reasons and more. On top of NPCs suddenly forgetting all survival instincts in the event that they need to be somewhere for a quest, sometimes the pathfinding will get wonky and they'll just run off to nowhere in particular if you manage to save a guy that was unlikely to be saved by the game's reckoning. They'll also do the opposite and wander off into nowhere in particular like they were loners in the event that they survive a quest, and then you'll hear them over the radio wandering right into anomalies and dying like they were expected to during the quest. Sometimes it gets so bad that when the AI gets lost, they'll start to walk through walls right in front of you or teleport around just to get out of an inaccessible area that I'm not sure how they got into in the first place. Lastly, while it's not so much as a jank thing as a bad design thing, the PDA's design and UI is really clunky, and I frequently found myself getting annoyed with the map controls or setting up which quest I actively wanted to follow. It's also a pain that every time you boot up the game, it makes all your PDA's diary notes unread again, so when you get new info that you need to read up on to advance in a quest, you're gonna need a minute to parse through what's all old information that's been marked as unread that you've read a dozen times already, and what was actually the thing you just found on a PDA or document that you just picked up and need to read through in order to have an idea of where to go next. It's, I guess it's kind of petty though, but it is annoying. Before we get into the spookies, let's take a second to give some love to our sponsor, Acheron. Acheron is a tabletop RPG available for pre-order now, which takes place in a grim punk fantasy world inspired by the likes of Lovecraft and the SCP Foundation. In Acheron, you and your buddies roll a cast of characters from unique races that are going to set out and explore the mysteries of the breach that once were held at bay by a great wall. Until somebody broke it. Well, that's their problem. And also now the problem of the shadowy governments of the world. You want to go out there and touch all the stuff, something's got to be worth money in there. Explore tombs and spooky towns looking for secrets and other stuff for whatever demented reasons your characters might have. Be careful though. The things from the breach are pretty dangerous, and thanks to the Die Hard system, you won't just die, you'll probably just go insane or lose a limb or something, which will be all the more interesting and give you a cool story to tell around the campfire. Whether you place your order for the PDF version or the hardcover book, you'll be given access to the beta so that you and your tabletop buddies can all get in on the action as soon as possible. Use the link in the description to check out S.T.A.L.K.E.R and give them some of that Halloween in July love. Now that we've got the gameplay, warts and all, covered, let's talk about the story elements. So what is the zone? Why is this zone? Who's in the zone? Well, outside of spoilery stuff, the zone is still everything inside of the cordon after the second incident at the Chernobyl power plant, where things started getting pretty weird. Inside of the zone, there's various factions that all have their own goals within it. There's your typical stalkers and traders to hunt for artifacts hoping to get rich. There's the duty faction who want to contain the zone however they can to protect the world from all the stuff inside the zone. And then there's the freedom faction who wants the zone to be their new uncapped paradise, putting them in direct conflict with duty. There's also the ecologists, a contingent of scientists who just want to poke the zone and see what happens. There's other factions that you won't be as involved with, such as the military who's trying to contain the zone and stop people from getting in, bandits, and the mysterious monolith faction that seems to know their way around the anomalies pretty well. So you're plopped into the game as a nameless marked one whose only lead is that he needs to kill someone named Strelock. You work towards this goal by working with the trader near the cordon who eventually points you towards the bartender in the middle of the zone where you really start putting the pieces together. You learn that whoever this Strelock guy was, he knew his stuff. He had a crew of people who knew the zone and they had found a way to get past the brain scorchers in order to get to the untouched parts of the zone and had a pretty impressive stash under the Agripalm research facility. You'll eventually link up with the ecologists who shed some light on what this Strelock fellow and his crew were up to and allow you to get past the psychic countermeasures of certain parts of the zone in hopes of finding Strelock. Okay, spoiler time. You know what to do. So, surprise, surprise, the Strelock we were looking for was inside of us the whole time. It turns out that these monolith guys have the ability to brainwash dudes into service, and they considered Strelock a problem to their operations, so they started programming stalkers who wandered too close to their base to go and kill Strelock. It turns out that one of the guys they brainwashed to kill Strelock was you, and you are actually Strelock, so that's a bit of a goof on their part. It turns out that Monolith is, or was, a group of scientists who are using the exclusion zone as a cover to perform mass-scale experiments on the human psyche through something called the noosphere, which in Stalker is a layer around the Earth similar to the atmosphere, which contains and links all emotions of sentient beings into a psychic field. The guys at Monolith thought they could manipulate the noosphere to alter human emotions, eliminating negative traits such as greed and anger. But instead they poked a hole in reality, creating the second incident at Chernobyl, which is when things went from radioactive to really weird. In order to help contain this boo-boo in the noosphere, a number of the scientists merged their minds into a collective consciousness called the C consciousness that now controls all of Monolith's operations and uses its willpower to contain the zone. As a safety measure, they also created the Wish Granter inside the Chernobyl MPP, which is actually a way to lure stalkers into their clutches so that they can have a steady supply of dudes to do their dirty work for them while they work on ways to contain the zone. You can eventually learn all of this if you learn the right things and get your hands on the decoder to breach deeper into the Chernobyl MPP instead of just trying to bum rush with the Wish Granter. And there's like 7 different endings you can get in Shadow of Chernobyl, but the true ending is where things really start to fall apart. So for most of the game, Stalker is a really gritty survival shooter experience where every firefight is super tense and the game is mostly about exploration and survival. Occasionally you'd have the military come in and try to clean up your messes, which often resulted in an oh shit moment, since prolonged firefights with anyone better equipped than the bandits tends to be a very bad idea when it's just you, so it's better to book it out of there. Right at around the time you need to go storm one of Monolith's bases and start ramping things up, you're gonna find yourself doing a lot of corridor shooting as you fight your way in and out of the facility containing the brain scorcher. This keeps happening as you storm Pripyat with whatever faction you got on the good side of, and eventually gets really annoying once you're storming the Chernobyl NPP, as the game has essentially devolved into a corridor shooter, except you still have to do RPG management things like inventory, healing inside of a menu, and dealing with weapon degradation. Fighting your way to where the sea consciousness will talk to you is a slog enough, but the fight you need to undergo in order to get the true ending is an absolute hell ride wide and goes against everything that the game was about up until a couple hours ago. Rather than carefully picking your fights, as extended combat is going to wear down your gear and put you in a bad spot, you're now bum rushing swaths of dudes who will literally teleport in front of you in a linear sequence of portal jumps that you have to do, as even with the highest possible amount of radiated protection, including like a suit and a bunch of artifacts that will negate radiation, the area around the portals is so radioactive it'll kill you in seconds if you just try to make a beeline for the sea consciousness. There's even endgame armor just sitting around at certain points in the fight, as I guess that they knew this stuff was going to be wrecked midway through, so they left you some new things. Personally, while the last few hours of Shadow of Chernobyl go really downhill, if they just cut out like the last hour and had it end where you shoot all those things to talk to the sea consciousness, and then you can just walk into the next room and kill them if you wanted to, Stalker would have been a much better experience overall. So, you've got to the end of Shadow of Chernobyl and you want more. Well, it's a good thing that there's a whole lot more Stalker for you to play, the first of which is the game that came immediately after Shadow of Chernobyl, Stalker, Sky. I can't say too much about this one since, I'll be honest with you, I haven't really played it, but the public sentiment seems to see that this is the weakest offering of all things Stalker. It's set as a prequel to the events of Shadow of Chernobyl, and from what I can tell, it has you taking an alternate path to whatever Strelock and his crew were doing at around that time. Then, we've got Call of Pripyat, the game that came after Clear Sky. Call of Pripyat is a sequel to Shadow of Chernobyl where you play as a G-Man who's sent to investigate the zone, which seems to be changing and expanding, and you learn some stuff along the way. Call of Pripyat was my first Stalker game and I really enjoyed it. A good way of thinking about how it improves on Shadow of Chernobyl is that pretty much anything that was a sore spot in the first game is added or improved in Call of Pripyat. You can have 2 primary weapons equipped at a time, you can find places to repair your stuff, hire dudes to be your backup for more dangerous missions, and the ending isn't so wonky. Call of Pripyat also adds a whole lot of new stuff too, and is definitely worth your time if you want to get into the series. Then if the main games weren't enough for you, there's the standalone mods, the most prominent of which is Call of Chernobyl. Call of Chernobyl was initially just porting over the first game into Pripyat's version of the X-ray engine, but it seems to have evolved into its entirely own thing since I last looked at it like 8 years ago, I think. It's a full-blown standalone download on ModDB. Then we've got Lost Alpha, a mod that aims to recreate what GSC Games World was originally aiming for with Shadow of Chernobyl. The game is much bigger physically, necessitating cars to get around sometimes. It has a ton of features and enemies that were added in that were cut from the final game. If that wasn't enough for you, there's actually 2 versions of Lost Alpha, the base one, and then the developer's cut, which is more along the lines of adding pretty much every feature imaginable to the framework of Stalker Lost Alpha. And then on top of that, there are a ton more Stalker mods to explore and try out with varying levels of polish. Heck, there's enough Stalker games to where I could do a whole month of nothing but Stalker for like, say, next year's Halloween in July. You know what, I'm gonna put a poll in the description of this video to see if you guys want that, or just a normal Halloween in July next year. Go do some democracy for me. In closing, I'd wholeheartedly recommend Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl and the Stalker series in general. It's pretty much everywhere and it's a great blend of spooky and shooty. I'll drop an affiliate link to the Humble store where you can pick up the game and activate it where you please, along with supporting the channel at no extra cost to you. If you'd like to support what I'm doing here, I run a Patreon account that makes this channel possible, and it's where you can go to get early access to these videos, 4K cat clips, uncut commentary videos, recipes for the cooking segments, and so much more. To help sweeten the deal, any new patron who makes a pledge of $5 or more will get a special Halloween in July card sent to them through my personal thanks. To make things easier to hit that $5 mark, I've also slashed those yearly pledges as low as they'll go for the month of July. Go check it out on patreon.com/charlottesandwonder. So up next, we're gonna get artsy spooky with Layers of Fear. Be sure to subscribe and ring that silly little bell that does what a subscription is supposed to do in the first place to make sure that you catch it. In the meantime, stay safe, stay indoors, wash your hands regularly, and enjoy this cat video. Oh, who is that sticking out of the hallway? Oh, I'm gonna scoop. I'm gonna scoop you up like a cute little baby. Look at this adorable little floofle. I know it's kind of bright. Oh, you want to go into the food room? Daddy's making people snacks. Look at this cute baby. Look at this cute baby. Alright, I'll take you back to your tree. Up we go. Oh, sorry, I'm covered in flour.